Hey everyone, before this video starts, I'd like to give a special thank you to all my Patreon and Twitch subscribers. If you'd like to learn how to support this channel, possibly for free, just hang out till the end of the video. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Listen, I just got back from the movie theater with my wife, and we saw The Batman. And it was very cool for a couple of reasons. One, this was like the first time we actually went to the movies together. We met, like, before COVID, and then COVID happened, and then no movies. So we never really went to a movie theater. We did one time later on because her uncle like rented out part of the movie theater. So like her family went and we watched a movie everybody had seen before because her grandmother wanted to get out of the house. So it was a nice gesture, but it didn't count. It doesn't count. So this was the first time. And we went to AMC, and I'm not going to say which one, but let me tell you, it was a little rough. I had gotten a pass from Costco, $40 for 2 tickets and $20 worth of food, which you know is it's enough for 2 tickets and $3 worth of food. The food we got, large drink and a large popcorn, $18. Insane. Also, for whatever reason, none of the soda machines had ice and all the drinks were warm. So it was already a really nice experience. Bathrooms weren't super clean, but that's neither here nor there. Now, I will say, when I get to the point where we start doing spoilers, I'll let you know. What I will say, though, that there was a beautiful moment in the movie. It was a very beautiful moment in the Batman movie where the tension was really tense, and then the tension started to die down, and the tone shifted, and the music dropped, and there was a moment of silence, a very brief moment. And in that moment, you were really supposed to sit back and reflect on what had happened. It was a stop so that you could absorb all the information because it was so fast paced. And this was your time that you got to just take it all in for a brief moment before pushing the progress forward and moving the movie forward. And in that brief moment of silence, the girl next to me shit her pants. And it's an experience that you're never going to be able to get unless you go to the movie theater with a girl that shits her pants, because that's what happened. All of a sudden, it's quiet and it's like and I'm like, wow, incredible. And I did that. It was incredible. This is the greatest part of the whole movie. It was incredible. It was incredible. Outside of that incredible experience that we had, I came into the Batman expecting it to be good, and I will say I wasn't disappointed. It was actually really good overall. And what I will say, though, is my expectations were really low considering how not great the Justice League movie was. The original cut was horrible. Scott Snyder cut. Am I saying that right? Yeah. Was okay. It was decent, but it wasn't like, it didn't really compel me. So I came into this with very low expectations, and then they were, of course, met and even surpassed. But I'm not sure if it's because the movie was truly amazing or if because we were also disappointed by Marvel movies that we have like really low expectations now. Overall, I will say 3 hours long. I don't want to say it was boring, but it dragged a little bit in the beginning, but it did a pretty good job of establishing itself. It took a long time, but it established itself pretty well. There were a couple of weird moments, and we're going to start getting into spoiler alerts where it's going to be a little bit difficult for maybe you to know what's going on unless you watch it, and I would genuinely recommend that you go watch it. There were a couple of weird, like, not fleshed out storylines that happened. One moment was there was this Russian, basically, prostitute. I forget what her name was in the movie. But, like, she had just gotten, like, she just was covered in bruises at one point. They showed her with, like, the mayor or some shit. And they never explained why she was covered in bruises. It was weird. Anyway, the storyline was solid, but it was a little bit convoluted. There were a lot of moving parts. It operated pretty well, though. It did a good job flushing itself out throughout the movie. I think all the actors were great. I had no problem with the acting. I felt like Catwoman was written a little bit whiny. It was also weird that she had to drink a whole glass of milk. I know that she's Catwoman, but it just felt like, does she have to drink a whole glass of milk in the fucking movie theater? It gave me diarrhea just listening to her drink. Watching her drink it actually made me have to shit. And as you guys know, I threw my back out, so I haven't pooped since I did that because I simply cannot sit down onto the toilet seat comfortably and get back up. So unless I want to sleep on the toilet, you know, it's just a very uncomfortable feeling. I will say it was weird. I didn't even know it was Colin Farrell. Like, going into the movie, I didn't remember it was him. And you can't tell it's him because of the makeup, which is a double-edged sword, because it would have been nice to know it was Colin Farrell. because it would have just been nice to know. Yeah, that's definitely fan service, having her drink a whole glass of milk for sure. Yeah, man, I thought the movie was great. One thing that it kind of was a little bit spoiled towards the end. This is where we're getting into like leave the stream. This is spoiler alert territory. So the general story basically is this. It's quite a bit. Oh, before we get into it, yeah, no, okay. So this was like a darker Batman. There was really nothing fleshed out about him as Bruce Wayne. Most movies will have his like they will juxtapose, his Bruce Wayne character and the Batman character. Bruce Wayne is usually like this debonair, suave, charming individual, and then Batman is this brooding fucking dickhead, badass that beats the shit out of people. They just kind of cut out the whole Bruce Wayne aspect of it, and it was weird to me, but it worked well with the way that they wrote the movie, because they wanted it. And I went in there knowing that we were going to have an emo Robert Pattinson, not because I listened to or read any resources, but because I was like, they picked Robert Patterson. Am I saying it's Rob? They picked the Twilight vampire, and I was like, this is going to be emo Batman, and we got emo Batman. It might as well have been written by Tim Burton, but it was actually good. It was good. There wasn't a single moment in it where I was like, oh, this is stupid, except for one where it's Pattinson. Okay, I don't care. He's going to be Twilight vampire now. That's how we're going to call it. It was towards the beginning of the movie when it's the first time you see the Batman, not just Batman. And he goes to beat the shit out of a bunch of people, and they're like, who do you think you are? And then he beats the shit out of them, and he's like, I'm vengeance. And I was like, all right, a little cringe. He should have just said I'm Batman or the Batman, or just not said anything at all. But that was the only moment that really made me cringe, except for a moment at the end that we'll get into a little bit later. Either way, I liked the take on it generally. Like I was saying before, the story, it's a little bit intense. It takes more of like a systemic approach on Batman, which to a lot of people will probably make them uncomfortable. To me, I actually found it a little bit refreshing. Like, one of the funny things is that historically, when we look at Batman, we're like, this is a rich billionaire, cool guy who uses his money to fight crime on the side at night. And it's like really great because he's like the cool billionaire that actually cares about people. But as you get older and you start to understand things better, you find it bizarre that there's a literal fucking billionaire in Gotham when the area is poor. It doesn't make any sense unless he's like siphoning resources, or why doesn't he implement some kind of universal basic income, or why doesn't he implement better social programs? Instead, it almost comes off like he's intentionally letting these people grow up like shit and then just beating the fuck out of them after they commit crimes, partially due to their socioeconomic stances. So it was actually, there was parts in there that made you kind of face that slightly, but it wasn't like really in your face and intense. So it was pretty solid. The general story, it's a little bit convoluted. Again, I would say check it out yourself. But basically, there's this huge, when you go through the movie, there's this huge, the plot point is, it's like a very extra story that starts with his father. And maybe this is time to pull out paint so I can organize my thoughts. And we also love it when I pull out paint. Spoiler alerts. Turn it off. Okay. So we kind of it starts with, this is basically the conspiracy theory from my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong. So we start with Thomas Wayne. We're just going to make him as a T. Right. And back in the day before he's dead, him and Martha are together. Thomas Wayne, he runs for mayor, right? He wants to be the mayor. We'll say mayor. He wants to be the ma of the city, right? Problem is a reporter gets in the way and reports on the fact that Martha is fucking crazy. Now, Martha has mental problems, and she was in and out of Arkham Institute, right? She's been in and out of Arkham Institute throughout her life because she struggles with her mental health issues. And this reporter wants to report on this, but Thomas Wayne doesn't want him to report on it because it'll make his campaign look bad. So he has him killed. But before he does that, the movie very heavily relies on this idea of opening up like this renewal project, I believe it's called. So it's this project where they're going to, Thomas Wayne as a running campaign says, I'm going to open up this renewal project where it's $1 billion. It's $1 billion to an orphanage, whether I win or lose. right? Anyway, so Thomas, there's the reporter. He has the reporter killed because he wanted to report on Martha been going in and out of a mental institution, right? However, which sets us up for being like, oh, Thomas is actually a bad guy, which I thought was very interesting. Then as the movie progresses, we find out he didn't actually try to have the guy killed. He went to this other character, I think it's Falcone, to pressure him into not coming out with the story. Not because he cared about his political run, but because he didn't want his wife to be embarrassed because people don't understand mental health problems. I'm assuming that's what part of it is. But Falcone took it upon himself to kill him. I feel like they should have committed a little more to just saying Thomas Wayne was kind of a bad guy. I didn't like the fact that they set this plot point up and then they desperately tried to walk it back. I think it would have been better if he just like said, yeah, last resort, kill this motherfucker, and then he deeply regretted it. It's still really bad and wrong, but I feel like they tried too hard to save Thomas Wayne's image. And to me, I wish they would have just they would have had the balls to just say he was kind of a bad guy. But he did a lot of good things. Anyway, after his death, this $1 billion, like basically unregulated fund for the orphanage was up for grabs. So basically, all the cops and like other people in the government and like district attorney and everybody wanted to get a dip in the pot there, and it ended up being in control of Falcone, which was the person who killed the guy here, right? So he ended up being the big old kingpin, and his name doesn't start with a P, so I don't know why I said that. And this is kind of what the movie is about, is unraveling this mystery here. Then you have the main, well, let's do Selena Kyle first. So you have Catwoman, right? Now, her story is a little bizarre, and we'll do the Riddler later. Her story is a little bit bizarre to me because apparently, turns out, she is the daughter of Falcone and some prostitute. I don't know. Basically, a fucking prostitute. And you don't learn this till later on in the movie. And the reason why this is weird is because in this movie, there's this scene where they go into like a club within a club for all the bad guys. And she goes into this club and there's a moment that the two of them have together that comes off as very sexual. Right? He grabs her face and be like, oh, I haven't seen you in a while, sweetheart. And it feels kind of sexual and uncomfortable. And we assume that there's an uncomfortable sexual part. Then you learn that that's her dad. So you're like, oh, okay. Going back, you look at it, it doesn't come off as sexual anymore. It comes off as like, oh, you're my daughter. I just don't know how to be a good father. But then later, and again, spoiler alert, she goes to kill her dad because her dad's an asshole, and she's like, hey, do you remember the name? This, she says the prostitute mom's name. You remember my prostitute mom, dad? And he's like, oh shit, which implies he never knew that that was his daughter up until that point, and it makes the original scene even incestual. It was really weird. I felt it was a little bit incesty. I came off as a little incestual. I was a little uncomfortable. I was very confused. So that part was bizarre. There was also a line, and this part bothered me. It was the only line that bothered me. As you watch the movie, you could see some like political narratives. Like at the beginning, they established like there's two running mates in the modern day. There's some white conservative and some black female progressive, and you could feel some of like the elements being pushed into the show, but it wasn't like overwhelming. It was like, okay, I know what you're doing, whatever. But then later on, for whatever reason, Catwoman makes this argument about how that there are oppressive rich guys. There were these oppressive rich guys controlling Gotham, which I was all on board for until they threw in the weird like whitey part. They were like these rich white men, and it's like, okay, what if we just listen? Okay, I understand systemic racism pretty well here, but it just feels like it just came off as annoying. It's like, come on. Like, it just feels so forced and inserted. Like, there's no reason to bring Ed Pol into this. You know what I mean? It's like, who fucking, like, come on. It was just an annoying part. For a lot of people, I could see why I would ruin it. It's a little annoying, but it's just like unnecessary. It's complete. Everything else was fine. Like, oh, these rich people don't care, blah, 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 blah. But the white part is like, oh, come on. Maybe that's just my white sensitivity or whatever it's called, but it was just annoying. As far as them casting a black dude as Commissioner Gordon, I've seen people bitch about that. What was it, Jeffrey Wright? I love Jeffrey Wright. I've seen him in several different pieces. He's incredible. People complaining about Jeffrey Wright's character as Commissioner Gordon, or he was not a commissioner yet in this, is annoying. He just did a good job. And what I don't like about people are like, I don't like race swapping. It's like, who gives a fuck? Like, who really cares? Because the thing is it's not like they inserted Jeffrey Wright into Commissioner Gordon and said, look, it's a black guy. He was just Commissioner Gordon that was black, and he's a really good actor. And if the whole argument is like, hey, like, we don't care about the race, then why the fuck do you care about the race? Like, he was good. He did a really good job as the character. He wasn't your traditional Commissioner Gordon. Like, he wasn't as like, he was still pretty stern. He was a little bit more smoother, I guess. He was a little more, I don't want to say laid back. I don't know what the feel that was different. It wasn't a bad feel. He was pretty similar. He was very similar. Like, he was very idealistic. He was a tough guy, but he wasn't like an overbearing guy. He was more lenient with Batman. That's what I'm looking for. Yeah. He was a little more lenient and more trusting of Batman. It worked out just fine, especially since we had an emo Batman. He needed the extra support. Lastly, the Riddler. The Riddler storyline actually really bothered me. Yeah, he was more innocent. Yeah, I guess that's a good way to say it. And it's because it was a really good storyline, and I felt like they ended it on a fart. Right? So the Riddler storyline is basically the Riddler is trying to expose this entire, like, deep conspiracy-esque operation, right? He's trying to expose the conspiracy, right? And he does it so brilliantly. He does it great. The puzzles are really cool. The whole thing is really well done, and he leads Batman on. And he keeps saying that, like, we're doing this together, Batman. We're doing this together. And it's so interesting because one of the things that the Riddler does is he hates Bruce Wayne, which they never really did anything with. And the reason I'm saying that is because he hates Bruce Wayne because when Bruce Wayne was made orphaned, he stole all the attention from the other orphans. Everybody was like, oh my God, poor Bruce Wayne. Your dad died and your mom died. You're an orphan now. But he's a billionaire. That's what the perspective of the Riddler was. So he hated him because he felt like the Riddler was cheated out of the system because the renewal program was a failure. And nobody cared about the actual orphans, which was a great establishing part of the whole thing. It worked really well, and I enjoyed it a lot. The problem that I had with it, though, was through the whole thing, he was leading Batman on. Well, one of the things I had a problem with is that they never, like, showed that Bruce Wayne was the Batman to the Riddler in a way, so it never shattered him in that capacity, which I think was a big miss. I think that there was a moment where the Riddler was, like, coming all over Batman, and while he was at the same time shitting all over Bruce Wayne, I was like, this would be the perfect moment for him to shatter his perception of the Batman by showing him he was the Riddler, showing him that he's Bruce Wayne. And I felt like they missed a little bit. They missed, like, a big emotional assassination that would have destroyed the Riddler and, like, caused him to absolutely go fucking ballistic. And I would have loved it if it happened. And I don't know if you could have made it happen without, like, ruining the story potentially, because, like, the Riddler knows who Batman is now. But it would have been so fucking awesome. And I felt like they almost did it because they're sitting there towards the end in jail, and Batman's on one side and the Riddler's on the other side, and the camera's only faced at the Riddler, and I'm like, he's gonna tell him that he's fucking Bruce Wayne. And I was like, holy shit, that would have been cool as fuck. Might not have been a smart thing to do, but I felt like that would have been, like, a very poetic part. The problem I have, though, is that the Riddler manipulated the fuck out of Batman, and it was actually great. I was there for it. He led the Batman into a role of supporting his plan to inevitably kill Falcone. That's what he wanted to do. And he led through this whole thing of riddles, and it's really fun, and it's really exploratory, and you see how intelligent Batman is for even interpreting the riddles, and somehow the Riddler is still a step ahead, and he manipulates the Batman to inevitably put Falcone into the spotlight to be able to get killed, for the Riddler to kill him. That's what he wanted to do. He wanted to kill Falcone. It was great. It was amazing. The storyline was really good. They established an incredibly intelligent, methodical character that was also a bit unhinged. And the movie didn't end there. They took it to the next level. And the reason I say that, and this is what really hurt it for me, is we went from this character, the Riddler, who was trying to expose the problems in Gotham society. He comes off almost as a good guy. He's killing all these bad people that were doing all these bad things. He was like, you had empathy for the bad guy. And it all roped up to the point where you go, oh my God, he manipulated Batman. And they established Batman really well. He didn't really lose fights. He got his ass kicked sometimes, but it wasn't some Mary Sue bullshit, right? Like he came in, he was strong, he was stronger than Catwoman, and not because he's a boy, but it makes sense to the story because this is your main character, and but she's still formidable, so they established her really well as like somebody who can fight, and it was really good, and he comes off very intelligent, he gets all the riddles, and he figures everything out with a little bit of help, and it goes really well, and then right at the end, it turns out that the Riddler's grand scheme wasn't just to dissect the systemic problem in Gotham, right? The end of the movie, he fucking flooded Gotham by blowing up like the bridges or whatever the fuck, and then getting a bunch of crazy people in an online forum similar to 4chan, the floodgates, yeah. He got a bunch of crazy people with fucking rifles to basically, he destroyed all the water. He destroyed all the floodgates, right? Like 7 of them. And it flooded Gotham, right? And so for whatever reason, the plan is for all of them to go to this Coliseum that happens to be below the ground level. It's not even risen, which was bizarre. That they're like, we all have to go to the stadium. That's the safe place to go. But it's like down... It was just down in the water. Why would your backup plan to be go to a fucking Coliseum that's below sea level if it ever flooded? It didn't really make sense to me, but I was like, okay, fine. And then he had a bunch of guys with rifles. He got them to go there and start shooting at people. It didn't really make sense to me. It didn't really make sense to me that was his grand plan, because he was trying to deconstruct like systemic problems, and then he just decided to fucking shoot the fuck out of people. It didn't really add up too much to me. I think at the end they were trying to go for like even the progressive candidate also was going to be flawed. Nothing would ever change in Gotham, so they had to do something drastic. But it came off as a little unhinged. And I know the character was unhinged, but his plan was so carefully sewn out. And so it came off a little bizarre to me. But it still was good. It was pretty cool. They had some really cool action moments. Batman, every single time Batman fought, he beat the fuck out of these guys. And it was very satisfying. And I thought that was pretty cool. Those moments were really cool. So, yeah, it was like a mass shooting. So, the movie was actually really good. Another weird criticism is the movie just didn't know when the fuck to end. It was really bizarre. The movie, I just had no idea when to end. There was a point at the end, the flooding happened, and then there was a scene where Batman was helping, get people out of the flood and clean up. And he grabbed a girl or a guy or a non-binary person, I don't fucking know. And he helped them into the helicopter or something. And I was like, oh, good ending. And then they kept going. And then they did this shot with Selena Kyle. And I'm like, oh, good ending. And then it just kept going. And I was like, okay, just fucking end this goddamn thing. I got to piss. It felt like it didn't know exactly where to end. But it was still pretty good. Overall, I liked it a lot. There wasn't a whole lot of it was a good movie. I just felt like it had a lot of ideas and it didn't really flesh everything out 100%. It could have done a little bit of a better job fleshing a few things out, but also I think that overall it was actually a good movie, not even just compared to the previous DC movies that have been kind of taking a dump lately, but just in general it was pretty solid. It just had a lot of ideas that it wanted to execute. I will say though that at the end it was a little disappointing because at the end, the actual ending, because there's like 4 endings. They did like a little cameo of the Joker, or what I like to call he's the cringer, because that wasn't the Joker. It was the most cringe scene in the entire fucking movie. The most cringe scene in the entire Batman movie was at the end when you see the Riddler having a fucking meltdown in Gotham, like Arkham Asylum rather. And the Joker's right next to him. He's like, hey, bro, you did a good job. And then he starts laughing, but it's like a really cringe Joker laugh. And I was really hoping for Joaquin Phoenix's the Joker. I think he said he won't do anything else. But yes, the Riddler's laugh was better than the Joker's. There was a cringe fucking Joker. I don't know who they had play it. I would have been cool to see Joaquin Phoenix. I don't think that they're going to go in that direction, but this Joker made me cringe to like fucking high heaven, bro. It was terrible. It was just so cringy, and I was like, wow, this is a really good way to end the movie for me. But yeah, overall pretty solid. There's another criticism I have. I just can't remember what the fuck it was. Whatsoever. But I liked it. The worst part though was that the fucking girl that farted next to me they didn't even clean up. They left their drinks in the cup holders in the movie theater seat, and then they fucking left their popcorn buckets on the floor. So, you know, hashtag cringe, am I right, guys? That was pretty cringe too. You know, clean your shit up. Just fucking clean up your shit, bro. What the fuck's the matter with you? So, but yeah, man, that was pretty solid. Oh yeah, and then there was one criticism somebody had about how like there was only 2 good white people in the movie. That was Batman and Alfred. I disagree. The Martha and Thomas character were posed as good guys as well. They just had like flawed pasts. Wasn't that big of a deal. Also, there was a scene at like towards the end-ish of the movie, maybe like the 80% mark, where we've established who all the corrupt cops were. And then like they went outside and they're like the Falcon's like, you can't arrest me. I got the cops in my pocket. Bop. And then they walk outside and Commissioner Gordon's like, you don't have all of us in your pocket. And like all the cops were white. It was totally fine. Why does it matter how many good white people are? I don't know. Because like people are complaining about not being enough good white people. I mean, the fucking main character was white. Who gives a shit? I thought the movie was solid. It was pretty good overall. I'm excited to see where it goes with Robert Twilight Edward. Were there good Asian people? Oh, that's funny that you brought that up. I think this was really funny to me. At the beginning of the movie, there was a bunch of people. They had Joker paint on them. This was the first. Like I thought they were Joker's guys. I don't know. I guess not. But there was a gang, the Joker gang, I guess, or something. And they went to beat the shit out of an Asian guy, and I'm sitting there laughing. And I don't know if one of the guys was black, but I think he might have been, and I just thought it was funny. I was like, oh, that guy looks black. Like, is this supposed to be like a Stop Asian Hate kind of like a allegory? Is that the right word? I don't think that's the right word. Criticism where it's like, oh, well, it's disproportionately black people committing like hate crimes against Asian people. That's not racist. That's just what it is. And I thought it was funny. I thought that's what they were doing. And then in the theater, I was just laughing. I'm like, oh yeah, Stop Asian Hate. It was silly. But there you go. There was that Asian. I don't know if there's any other Asian people in there. I wasn't really paying attention too much to their races. So yeah, that was it. It wasn't bad. I can't wait to see more. I think that this was a really good movie, though. Overall, it was actually a good movie to set off like the DC Universe's movie titles. So yeah, it was the Joker thing. Okay, no. So I liked it. It was pretty solid overall. Not much else to say, bro. Go watch it. It's still worth the watch. Just don't go to AMC movie theater. How's that? You like that? You like that criticism? I'm a little interested in what Shapiro has to say.
Alrighty, folks. So last night I went and I saw The Batman. My review of that is coming up in just one moment. This video is sponsored by Ring.
Shut the fuck up.
I saw it with my wife. So last night I went and saw The Batman. Went and saw it with my wife. It is 1 million hours long, and it's one of those movies where I started off and I was like, okay, and then I got a little further in. I was like, all right, and then I got to the end. I was like, eh. And then the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. And so you're about to hear a lot of hot takes on The Batman because I hate this movie. Okay, first of all, I'm just going to tell you right up front, spoilers. Spoilers are plenty here. If you haven't seen the film yet and you want to see the film, you don't want to be spoiled, I'm warning you. You've been warned. All right, this is Detective Batman. So if the original Michael Keaton Batman was sort of crime-fighting Batman and the Christopher Nolan Batman was city-saving Batman, this Batman is supposed to be Detective Batman. And this has a long history in the Batman comics. Some of the best.
It makes sense because DC Comics is actually stands for Detective Comics. So Batman's supposed to be a detective. I think they did pretty good there, by the way. They made him a pretty good detective. He was actually pretty solid. He was a detective. He was a smart guy. That's what Batman's supposed to be known for, was his like drastic intelligence. And I feel like we didn't really get that with Ben Affleck's Batman. We kind of got an old angry guy with money. He had a lot of money, which is cool because that's Batman, but also is supposed to be like a really intelligent. I didn't see it with Ben Affleck's Batman. So
best Batman comics, particularly my favorite, The Long Halloween.
Oh, you want to know what part of the movie bothered me? There was a moment where Batman, he's wearing an armor fucking suit, and he gets shotgun blasted in the stomach. Okay, he gets shotgun blasted in the stomach. but he's wearing armor, but it still takes the wind out of him and hurts him. And then Selena Kyle kisses him on the lips, and I'm like, that's sexual assault, bro. Selena Kyle, more like Selena Gomez. Am I right, guys? I mean, come on, he didn't even give you his consent. He couldn't even speak. He had the wind knocked out of him. You know what I'm saying? Consensual kisses. That's all I'm saying, bro. Did I say Selena Gomez? Who did I mean? Sienna Gomez. Oh, well, you know what? You can't win them all. You really can't win them all. Sienna May, Selena Gomez. Pretend the joke made sense. Anyway, that's all. That's what I wanted to say. Okay.
And is rooted in the idea of.
Oh, and then he did like heroin, and he was normal again. He's like, oh, I gotta do drugs, and then he did drugs, and he got all his powers back. Oh, you know what? Hold on a second. You know what was a really weird part of that movie, dude? There was a scene where he was getting chased by cops, so he jumps off the top of a building, and he turns into a flying raccoon. His suit turns into a flying squirrel suit. I was like, okay, this is weird. He looks really dumb, but I'm okay with it. And then he crashes into the top of a bus and a bridge, and he gets flipped over, and he gets piled into the ground. And then he gets up, and he just kind of walks away, and he didn't have any internal bleeding. And that part that was a little bit bizarre to me, that he didn't die from that, because he hit the ground, bro. It was incredible. I'm like, this guy's dead. But.
And not just as Cape Crusader, but as a...
Yeah, Selena Gomez made a song about how she can't keep her hands to herself, so...
Great detective. Smarter than everybody else, capable of picking up on clues, investigating, and tracking down crimes.
Yeah.
I'm going to start with what's right with the film, because it's going to be real short. So what's right with the film is that it looks great. It is a film noirish take on Gotham City. It almost feels kind of like retro Taxi Driver Gotham City. So everything's very dirty. It's all taking place at night. It's shot in kind of grayscale at times. It's got a lot of warm oranges and reds, but against a very dark black. So it's a lot of muttered dialogue. It feels as though it's taking place in the same city as Joker is taking place. So if you saw Joker, Todd Phillips' Joker, which looks like 1970s New York, it feels almost like the other half of that, but it seems more like the take on what future New York would look like if you were living in New York in 1970. That's sort of a good way of putting it. The music to the film is okay. I think that Michael Giacchino tends to be a little bit derivative in how he does the scores to the films. This one, he basically
I forgot Ben Shapiro was a fucking music nerd. Okay.
Takes the music that Hans Zimmer and James Newton Howard wrote for Batman Begins in the Nolan trilogy, which the theme goes da-da, and here he just inverts it. So instead of da-da, it's da-da. Okay, fine. So it's a little bit derivative, but the score is totally fine. The acting is okay, as we'll find out in a second. They give Robert Pattinson nothing to do as Batman. Nothing to do as Batman. I didn't think that Zoe Kravitz had any sort of chemistry with Robert Pattinson.
That's a good point, actually. That's a reasonable point, because I felt like when I saw that, I didn't want them to have any type of relationship. I know they do in the comics, but it came off very forced. And I think it would have been refreshing if we could introduce a man and a woman together without them having to fuck each other. Like, it would have been like, cool. This is a thing that happened, but instead, like, they had to be sexually. Robert Pattinson, Twilight Edward came off as like he wasn't horny. He's just the whole movie he wasn't horny at all. Batman, the traditional Batman, is like a buff, muscular, machismo, debonair, charming, charismatic, fucking. He was not that. Which was fine. I thought it was actually great. I thought he was great, but he didn't have any horny energy, and then they kissed. And I was like, why? This didn't even make sense. There was no chemistry there.
So she's fine. She's kind of flirty. I didn't see anything particularly wrong with her performance. I just didn't see a lot right with her performance. You have John Turturro showing up as Carmine Falcone, and he's John Turturro, so he's okay. He's somewhat menacing. The best performance in the film is Colin Farrell playing the Penguin. You literally cannot spot Colin Farrell in this makeup. There's no way that you can see Colin Farrell here. The whole movie, I'm staring at him going, that's not Colin. It is Colin Farrell. It's the best performance in the movie. Paul Dano gives a good performance in the film, although he's sort of playing the Joker a little bit, although he's playing it more wide-eyed, as Paul Dano is apt to do. The main character of the film is the Riddler.
I thought the Riddler was solid.
And herein lies the main problem with the film. The biggest problem with the film is that the film hates Batman.
Okay. Why?
Like the actual Batman character hates the Batman character. And this drives me up an absolute wall. The biggest problem with the film is not the wokeness. Yes, there's some woke touches. You have Catwoman, who is a woman of color, who is, of course, good. And you have the black female mayor, who is good. And you have the black Jim Gordon, who is good. Every white character is apparently bad, like all of them. Fine, whatever. I don't really care about that. That's fine. You have Catwoman say stuff about white privileged elites, and she makes a suggestion that Bruce Wayne as a child, when his parents were killed, he doesn't really have a right to be super upset about that because, of course, he was very, very rich. That doesn't kind of rings hollow. You know, a lot of these lines seem like throwaways for film lefty Twitter, but the main theme is not a throwaway. The main theme is what matters here. the film despises Batman. So every Batman iteration has to explain why a man who is a billionaire would dress up like a bat and go around beating up criminals.
That was what I wanted to talk about. That was one of the things that really bothered me. I don't know what he's going to say, but there was an aspect before. It was something that really bothered me. In the movie, we all know that generally what happens with Batman is you have Bruce Wayne, you got your BW. Now I like BBW, excuse me. But, we don't have to talk about that. You know what happens? They're walking in a theater, mommy and daddy, they get nay-nayed. Boom. Mom and dad get nay-nayed, right? That part seems to be true. The thing is that the reason that dad died, it's told, because when Falcone nay-nayed that guy we were talking about before, the whole conspiracy plot, when the dad nay-nayed that guy, the dad's like, I'm going to expose you. I didn't want you to kill him. I just wanted you to scare him. So I'm going to fucking kill you. I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to go to the police. The reason that that's weird is that kind of conflicts because they seemed to, they established lightly that the core thing, like the what we understand was, right, the mom and dad. This is what happens in Batman, right? The mom and dad and Bruce, they go to like a movie or some shit. They're walking outside. They go down a dark alley. A criminal comes out and shoots him and kills him, right? Alfred's character is like, I don't know if that is what happened, like the scenario we just explained, or if Falcone killed him. I don't really know which one it is. That means that there was enough there. That means that the original event of how the mom and dad died, that still happened. We just don't know if it was intentional because he went against Falcone or Falcone, whatever, or if that was like a fucking just a random act of violence. We don't know. But what we do know is that they walked down a dark alley at night and they got killed. So to me, that suggests, well, if the dad was going to expose Falcone or, whatever for killing the reporter, why the fuck did he go to the movies before he went to report him? It doesn't make any goddamn sense. It really bothered the fuck out of me. I was like, Dad, are you a fucking idiot? I would have been like, we're skipping the movie tonight, son. We're going to go report this guy to the police if that was actually the narrative. So either the movie's being like really intelligent and actually telling us that Thomas Wayne never intended to do that, or what's more likely is that they kind of they were a little bit lazy on the death of the dad. And it was just bizarre because it's like, yeah, this guy killed somebody. I asked him to rough up a little bit. I'm going to go to the police. But first, we need to go see the new Madagascar movie. Boom! Right? And that's like, well, that's a little bit weird, bro. I mean, especially since they're releasing all the new Madagascar movies directly to TV. Anyway, but that actually bothered me a little bit. But anyway,
it's not answered, and the director doesn't know why a man who is a billionaire would dress up like a bat and go around beating up criminals. It's not answered, and the director doesn't know.
It is kind of answered. So they don't answer it heavily. We just established before. There's a moment they do answer this question. The reason he does it is the typical one. He thinks that a random person killed his parents, and he wants to fight against the crime in Gotham. The reason we know that they established this is because there's a light moment when he's talking to Alfred after Alfred's in the hospital because he got nay-nayed by a bomb that was meant for Bruce Wayne. He's in the hospital. And Alfred's like, yeah, bro, I think your dad got killed by Falcones. And Bruce is like, what the fuck, bro? You let me dress up like a fucking bat my whole life? Chasing after how good of a person my dad was? Because that's what it was. But he really is an asshole. And then Alfred's like, no, he's a good guy, blah, blah, blah. So they actually do establish it. It's just a cliche reason. I think it's fine. They just didn't really jump into it and dive headfirst into it. Like I said, the main problem is they didn't really flesh out the death of Thomas Wayne like in the accurate way. Like it would have been bizarre if it was Falcone because he's like, oh, well, I know Bruce is still going to see the movie before he calls the cops, so like no big deal, go kill him outside the theater. I don't really know. It's bizarre, but they do actually show us, they actually do explain to us why. So,
and the writer doesn't know, and this is the problem. So in the Nolan films, to take the contrast, the question as to why Batman does this is because if Batman does not actually intimidate the criminal underworld because the city is so corrupt, no one else will do it, and money isn't going to solve the problem.
That's still implied here. There was actually a lot of setup to show that like the bat symbol. We go into this where Batman has been Batman for 2 years, or the Batman, and just the mere sight of the symbol scares a lot of like petty crime, like petty thieves, so they stop doing crimes when that happens. But yeah, that's one of the things is he's just trying to live his father's legacy by Like they establish this in the movie. He's trying to he wants vengeance, or he wants to fix the city, like his dad couldn't have done because his dad got killed. You know,
and so he needs to create a theatrical kind of fear in order to dissuade the criminal underworld from participating. And then, as it turns out, he also has to save the city itself and demonstrate his faith in the city by becoming a symbol. Here, you don't really know why Batman is doing what he's doing. It's never explained. He's very wealthy. He doesn't apparently do anything with his wealth. He doesn't try to give charity. He doesn't. This is actually made a plot point. He's a bad man because he's white. He's a bad white man who doesn't actually give charity. He's not involved. And
that part, he's right about that. That scene that they just showed.
Plot point. He's a bad man.
This is the future mayor, the mayoral actor, where she was still running at this point, and she's like, "Bro, you don't fucking donate any money. I want to talk to you. Maybe you could donate some money." I actually thought it was a really good commentary on how this Batman was so consumed by the death of his father and trying to live within his father's shoes that he forgot to do what he should have done, which was open and operate charities in order to actually reduce crime rather than dressing up like a fucking bat the entire time. That was actually, to me, there was a lot of really solid, subtle commentaries and hits at Bruce Wayne that were really positive. They set Bruce Wayne up as a character who wanted to do good, but he was so consumed by his hatred that he didn't do good in the way he should have done good. I thought it was really intelligent. I thought it was very clever, but it wasn't really in your face because they weren't dragging Bruce Wayne or Batman for it. They were just showing that like he was a good guy that was just who he was a good guy, but he was so human he forgot how to act. Like, you know what I'm saying? He's like, I'm going to go beat up petty criminals. And it's good that he saved that Asian guy from getting beat up. But also, you know, what about the kids in the orphanage? And it was that oversight that causes a lot of these problems. To me, it was almost a way of explaining that, like, hey, listen, like this billionaire that means so well, who's had a family history of doing really well, is a flawed individual that's still consumed by himself. I thought it was fantastic. I thought it was great. I don't think that this is a reasonable assessment of the situation. I think maybe Ben Shapiro tuned out of the Batman movie because he thought it was a little too woke.
White. He's a bad white man who doesn't actually give charity. He's not involved, and he's not playing that as a role. Again, this is part of the problem, is that Bruce Wayne and Batman are the same character. So if I keep using the Nolan comparison.
Yeah, I don't think it's a problem. It's just different. Usually Bruce Wayne and Batman are two different characters. You know, Bruce Wayne, we already talked about charisma, sexy, blah, 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 Batman, brooding, fighting. They made it one character, and it was just a different take on Batman. I actually didn't dislike it. It was weird, but I didn't dislike it. It was just different.
Because it is the gold standard for all superhero movies, not just Batman movies. So when you look at Nolan's Batman, Bruce Wayne is the character that Batman is playing. Okay, Bruce Wayne is not real. Batman is real. Batman is who Bruce Wayne really is.
Oh, is Batman Israel, Ben? Is this another bit of your propaganda? What do they call them? What is it called? Like, I forget. Joke ruined.
And so he has to play a fop. In Batman Begins, he's squiring around ladies in his Lamborghini, and he's buying
Zionist. There you go.
Hotels, and he's doing all of this just to cover up for the fact that he is Batman. So you get very separate Batman and Bruce Wayne. You get the same thing actually with Michael Keaton. Batman and Bruce Wayne are two different characters. Here,
That's how it always been. They just did like a different take on Batman.
Batman and Bruce Wayne are the exact same character. There are points where Bruce Wayne is walking around. He's got the same dour expression, same glazed look, same kind of emo thing going on as Batman does the entire movie.
He's not enough of a man for Ben Shapiro. Robert Pattinson he's just not sexy enough for Ben.
And so there's no dichotomy. Alrighty, folks. Well, I may not have loved the Batman, but here's the thing. Real Batman knows how to protect himself and protect his family, and
Swear
you
to God,
should
if this is a
too,
VPN
because
thing,
you
I'll
need
kill myself.
Ring Alarm. It's true. Ring makes an alarm. Ring Alarm is an award-winning home security system with available professional monitoring.
I might actually get a Ring Alarm, not because you said anything, Ben. Okay, so shut
It's
up.
more than just security. Ring Alarm can help protect your home from flooding, freeze, and fire as well. Ring Alarm works on any house or apartment. It has sensors for motion, doors, and windows. Their professional monitoring gives you the ultimate peace of mind. All of their services.
Oh my God, Ben, are you kidding me?
Too, because you need Ring Alarm. It's true. Ring makes an alarm.
Did you
Ring Alarm
catch
is an
this?
award-winning home security system with available professional monitoring. It's more
Well, I want you to understand something about this Ring Alarm commercial. Ready? Check this out.
protect his family, and you should too, because you need Ring Alarm. It's true. Ring makes an alarm. Ring Alarm is an
Okay, so
award-winning home security system with available professional
the black guy, he's the good guy, okay? He's the Ring Alarm expert.
monitoring. It's more than just security. Ring Alarm can help protect your home from flooding, freeze, and fire as well. Ring Alarm works on any house or apartment. It has sensors for motion.
White guy breaking into the house. Ben, more woke propaganda? You got a black good guy and a white bad guy? What are you kidding me? I can't believe you wrote this. Jesus Christ, Ben. Can't even adhere to your own criticisms of the Batman movie. Next time, make it a black guy trying to break into a house, Ben. I can't believe you fucking racist.
Doors and windows. Their professional monitoring gives you the ultimate peace of mind. All of their services are part of a Ring Protect subscription. There are no long-term commitments. If anything happens, professional monitoring will call you and can request emergency services. Best of all, Ring's professional monitoring is an amazing deal. Get so many great features, award-winning professional monitoring for less money than most professional alarm companies. You and your loved ones can rest easy.
All right.
Some more secure, I know what's going on / is tracking down criminals, and he.
All right, the plot. Let's get back into this. I cracked the code.
So here's the actual plot of the film. Batman has only been Batman for a couple of years, so he's not really good at Batmaning yet. And he is tracking down criminals, and
he beats all these guys up.
It's
pretty cool. It's actually a very good scene. It's very satisfying.
Into a plot by the Riddler. The Riddler is giving clues so that Batman can track down all the way through the system of Gotham this citywide corruption that apparently is going to bring down the entire superstructure of faith in the city. Meanwhile, you have Catwoman, who's Selena Kyle, played by Zoe Kravitz. And Zoe Kravitz is similarly engaged in an attempt to commit a robbery against one of these underworld figures, but she's drawn into Batman's orbit by a murder that both of them are investigating at the same time, the murder of her roommate, maybe something more going on there. The Riddler is the main villain of the movie. You see the Penguin a fair bit. Carmine Falcone is one of the big characters in the movie. You get a little bit of Alfred. Of course, you get Jim Gordon, whose main job in this film is apparently just to say Jesus over and over again.
Christ, it's Coulson.
Whenever something bad happens, he just goes, Jesus. And that happens like 6 times. Like, Jim Gordon does nothing except for basically stop Batman from getting arrested a lot. That's pretty much all he does. He's a bad detective. He doesn't do anything.
He does deck him right in the fucking head. It's a setup. I feel like that's unfair, man. Like, Detective Gordon is he's a good cop, and he's living in a system of corruption, and he knows it's corrupt. He may not know like how corrupt, and he sees Batman as like a refreshing figure. One of the things, actually, and I should have brought this up before, one of the really good parts of this movie is towards the endish, where the Batman and the Riddler, they have an interaction, and the Riddler was like, "Oh my God, I was so inspired by you to do everything I'm doing because I saw you as like basically a vigilante taking matters into your own hands, and that's what I did." And I feel like they didn't play into it enough. They basically, after that, they just dismissed the Riddler as a bad guy. This is when it got a little bit lazy for me. But they should have explored that, because it's like, holy shit, like maybe Batman, as good as he is intentioned, is having a negative impact by inspiring vigilante justice. And they don't really explore that plot point a lot. That's the point where they just decide to write Riddler off as like a crazy person because he wants to blow up half the city. And it kind of hurts the whole like aspect to it of like the Riddler was a good guy until he staged a mass shooting, you know? So, you know, that part was a little bit sticky for me.
The plot is that all these people get killed. Batman uncovers it. He realizes that his dad was corrupt also, or that his dad engaged in corruption with Carmine Falcone. Finally, we get to the end. Paul Dano does the...
Which I thought was good. I just wish they pushed a little harder into it. They tried to backtrack it. They tried to walk it back a little too hard and make him seem like a good guy again. I think that they should have made Bruce Wayne like a good guy that did bad things, which they did, but they took a lot of the responsibility off of Bruce Wayne. This was a bit of a problem with me, right? Like he was like, "Oh, I'm just trying to defend my wife from being defamed because she has mental health problems." But it should have been. So I just asked the guys I just asked Falcone to scare the reporter that was going to report on it, but it would have been better if after the death happened, he's like, "Okay, fuck it, this is what we got to." I don't know. Just for me, I felt like they tried too hard to maintain Thomas Wayne. They felt like they were a little bit, they were a little afraid to pull the trigger and be like, "Fuck it, Thomas Wayne is kind of an asshole." But
it's such a ripoff of Seven. He gives himself up. He doesn't get captured by Batman. Batman does not prevent a single one of these deaths. Batman, in fact, is complicit in one of the deaths by accident, and he doesn't actually capture the Riddler because he's clever. The Riddler gives himself up by sitting at a diner and getting arrested. Then
yeah, which I thought was fine. It's refreshing. It was refreshing. Riddler was a step ahead of Batman. They had a similar level of intelligence. It was a formidable opponent. It was I think it was good. I liked it. It was actually fairly poetic.
Unleashes a bombing of Gotham that essentially causes the flooding of the city. And Batman goes to the Madison Square Garden, where a mayoral event is now being held for the brand new mayor, who is an uplifting black female who has no other story or backstory, so she's really uninteresting. It starts to flood. And
I mean, I guess that's true.
up on top, in the wings, are a bunch of Paul Dano's followers, are a bunch of the Riddler's followers who are all dressed like the Riddler, and they are shooting down into the crowd to try and kill members of the elite in Gotham City. And so Batman goes up there and he's beating people up. There comes a point where he's beating this guy, and he's really, like, maybe beating him almost to death. And he stops, and they take off that guy's mask, and they say, "Who are you?" And the guy says, "I am vengeance." Okay, now this is the theme throughout the film. Ooh, the theme. Okay, so in order to explain why this is a problem, you have to now understand the character of the Riddler. So it says right at the beginning of the movie, "Who is Batman? I'm vengeance," right? He's just on the streets and he's beating people up.
I'm vengeance.
And then
that part was a little cringe.
and people keep calling him Mr. Vengeance for no apparent reason. Like, we don't know why they're calling him that, because he never actually publicly says he's vengeance. It's in his creepy diary, which again is supposed to be a mirror image of the fact that the Riddler also keeps a Zodiac Killer style diary. So they're supposed to be two halves of the same whole.
Oh, okay. I didn't actually catch that. I think that's good. I think that's actually great. They're two halves. They're like two sides of the same, different coin or whatever. Two sides of the same coin. I think that's great because that actually makes sense, and it was a good part of the show. It shows you the good vigilante versus the bad vigilante. But in both of these cases, there's pros and cons to each of them. You know, the Riddler, as shitty as he was literally exposing systemic problems and judge payoffs. and like rampant criminal issues, and like he's a bad guy, which again it ruins it at the end. We just started blowing shit up and killing people, which I thought was lazy writing. But before that, it was actually really well done.
Batman is beating up this follower of the Riddler's. He takes off his mask, and the guy says, "I'm vengeance." And suddenly Batman sees. Suddenly Batman realizes he can't be vengeance. That's not what he's meant to do. He's betrayed his mission. And so he then descends on an electrified cable because he's trying to stop people from being electrocuted by this flying electrical wire. And he cuts off the cable. He's holding on to it. He falls down into the water.
He gets electrocuted too, which is weird because he's wearing like I guess the suit's metal, but he's wearing gloves. That was weird.
He rebaptism. He gets up. And then
I guess so. He falls in the water and he comes out. It's like a baptism, Ben. You should like that. He's a born-again Christian.
Proceeds to lead a bunch of people who are not really trapped, but kind of trapped, I suppose. And he leads them to, I guess, a safer place by carrying a torch. And then he goes up to the top of Madison Square Garden, and he is helping people be airlifted and medevaced out. And this is how he has learned fulfillment. So what is this movie about? This movie is about how fighting...
a baptism, not even a baptism. Very funny. Very funny. Very funny. Yeah, his suit is rubberized. That's what I thought too.
Criminality does not actually help innocent people. He says this at the very beginning. He says, I'm not sure I'm doing any good. By fighting the criminals, crime is still up. It turns out that...
Yeah, that's what his struggle with. He's trying to do the right thing, but it seems like it's not the... Actually, Ben is just showing me that the story was better than I thought, because he does mention that. He's like, I don't know if I'm doing the right thing. And like... Again, then the mayor, the new mayor, the black mayor, right? The evil black mayor, according to Ben. She's like, hey, like you could donate and stuff. That'd be pretty cool. Maybe stop being a fucking lazy asshole, right? So it's like, oh wow, like this is showing us like, oh, maybe the better option rather than going on the street and beating up, petty criminals. Maybe go and try to make real systemic change, which you have billions of dollars to do. Actually makes a lot of sense. It actually works perfectly. It works really well.
Batman has to stop being Batman. Batman has been missing it the whole time. What Batman really has to be is Superman. Batman needs to go into areas like Madison Square Garden and not fight the criminals. He needs to go and lead people with a torch to a slightly safer area. He needs to help medevac people on the top of it. He needs to build Habitat for Humanity. He needs to join Jimmy Carter and build houses for homeless people. That's what Batman needs to be doing.
Probably. I mean, I still like the badass Batman beating the shit out of criminals. I think he could do both. I think that basically Batman historically has just been fucking insane and beating the shit out of people for fun. He should still do that because it looks cool and it's badass, and that's why you go to the fucking movie theater. But also, he should probably try to implement systemic change at the same time. That would be cool.
This really is a sort of attack on the idea that fighting crime helps innocent people. It's an almost defund the police attitude toward what crime is. And it's an attack on the basic idea that individuals are capable of doing justice by finding bad guys and fighting them. Instead, apparently, individuals are only capable of doing nice things by helping little old ladies cross the street. It's this sort of...
I think Ben missed the point because, again, they show the contrast between vigilante justice, where like one... I would argue that the Riddler was kind of the good guy for most of the movie until they ruined it at the end and made him a fucking... a mass shooter, basically, because he was literally seeding out corruption. It was actually very interesting. It was good. And I love the best part of the whole movie to me was when he tricked Batman into helping him. It was incredible. It was like, wow. And then he tried to be like, Batman, we did it. Batman's like, you're fucking crazy. Why are you trying to kill me, Joker? You know what I mean?
Mentality that has led to New York turning into Gotham City in the last couple of years, by the way. That's a fundamental betrayal of what Batman is. What makes Batman different from the Riddler and than any of these other criminals is these criminals target innocent people and Batman targets criminals. That's the...
Well, actually, the Riddler was targeting guilty people most of the movie until, again, he went fucking ballistic for no reason at the end.
Basis of the character. The entire basis of the character is the cops are bad at targeting criminals because they're corrupt. Batman is good at targeting criminals because he's smart and because he's rich and because he's incorruptible. That's the entire basis of Batman.
Yeah, that is the basis of Batman. That's when Batman was created in like the 20s or 30s. When we had am I right about that? And we have like a very misunderstood idea of like what doing the right thing is. That's the whole point. That's the criticism on Batman. It's like he's awesome. He beats the shit out of people, and he's an underdog. 1939, thank you. And he beats the shit out of people, but maybe there are better ways to fight crime rather than beating up crime after we've created criminals through systemic aspects. Maybe we try to fight for a better city that's less impoverished, Would that solve all the problems? Probably not. But I think it would solve some of them.
And they take all that and they flip it on its head because they don't like Batman. And this is why I have real problems with the movie. I kind of hate the movie. Like, the more I think about it, the more I get angry at it. Because they take the fundamental idea of what Batman is supposed to be, the protector of the innocent who targets the criminal, and they say that if he targets the criminal, this makes him no different than criminals. Because Paul Dano, who's the Riddler, is also targeting criminals. All the way up until the very end, when they have to just sort of add on this attack on Madison Square Garden
Yeah, I agree with this. It was fucking insane. There was no reason to do that. The Riddler was actually, it was a great complex character until that. They kind of drained his complexity with that.
And New York broad writ for no reason. He has no motivation for blowing up a bunch of trucks and flooding downtown. Like, none. He doesn't explain why he does it. He doesn't explain what the purpose of it is. All the way along, he's been saying,
I think that he just does it because the movie needed the bad guy. This is what bothered me, because I felt like at the end of the movie, they had created a great story, but they were like, we need to make sure people realize the Riddler is a bad guy, right? And that, so we got to make him murder a bunch of people. I was like, why? That's weird. It worked so good before that, because to me, it was like a cautionary tale of not letting things get so bad, you know?
I'm exposing the truth.
Okay, the purpose was that no matter who was in power, Gotham couldn't be fixed. My problem that I have with that, though, is that it's a lazy excuse for the complete shift in the character. Like, he was he was an unhinged character, the Riddler, but they established him as incredibly intelligent and targeting. He was very targeted. He knew exactly what he was doing, and it was really great. And then all of a sudden, he just goes fucking batshit. No pun intended. What would have been better was if, like, because the Batman rejected him as an ally, which he desperately wanted, the Riddler, then the Riddler decided to go ballistic and kill people. But that's not what happened. He had already set up the destruction of Gotham before Batman told him to suck a fart. And so, like, if they had done that part first, it could have made sense to the character, because he idolized Batman so much. And that if they had just done that one thing that shattered Riddler's perception of reality, I could have been on board more with what happened.
True face of Gotham. Okay, that's a rationale. But what does that have to do with blowing up the city? They add that on just so that they can create a false distinction between Batman and the Riddler, so that Batman can change his mission. So now Batman's mission is not beating up bad guys and stopping bad guys. Now Batman's mission is to be a firefighter. He's no longer a detective or a police officer. He's a firefighter. That's a betrayal. And it's a real problem. And that's my biggest issue with the film.
I mean, I think that they were just trying to show Batman could do good in other ways than beating up criminals, but
it just feels like such a sellout. It feels like such a sellout of what Batman is supposed to be. Again, it's got a little bit of woke politics, but that's really not the problem. The problem is the broader woke orientation of the film. If the Nolan Batman was about the idea that you help innocent people by fighting criminality and provide an inspiration to people to fight criminality, if that's the idea of Batman, which it is, that's completely thrown on its head here. Matt Reeves, who's credited as both a director and a writer on the film, he does not like Batman, and I can't get over this. How do you give $150 million to a dude to make a movie about Batman when he clearly does not like Batman?
I just don't think that's the truth. I just think that they were trying to show like a more real human side of Batman.
When he thinks that Batman is bad, and that Batman has to be shown the error of his ways and learn to be a nicer human being. By the way, at the very end of the movie, Catwoman, who at no point has actually demonstrated any sort of moral bona fides. Like, I'm not sure she does a moral thing in the entire movie. At the very end, she says to him, why don't you run away with me? And we'll go rob some hedge fund CEOs. And he doesn't say back to her, you know, that's bad to rob hedge fund CEOs. Instead, he's like, he thinks about it for a moment. She's like, no, you belong in Gotham. The generalized cheap left-wing sensibility is very silly with regard to Catwoman. If I have not made clear at this point, the movie's also 8 hours long. It's like a Wagnerian ring cycle, this film. It just goes on and on and on. Every shot is composed in order to have people walk across rooms. Like, Christopher Nolan would snap that cut right to the action. If you watch Dark Knight, there is no wasted motion in that film, and it's 2.5 hours long. This is 3 hours long, and it feels like 4. I never check my watch during movies, particularly not a Batman movie, and I check my watch at least twice during this film.
That's fair, because it did feel a little bit drawn out. I even made that criticism originally.
It's better than Marvel, because everything's better than Marvel, because Marvel doesn't take characters seriously, and Marvel feels like cotton candy. This doesn't feel like cotton candy. It just feels like a fundamental betrayal of the character, which is just, it's lazy writing, and more than that, it's not nice to the audience. The audience wants to see Batman be Batman and be good at being Batman and know why he's being Batman. They don't want to see Batman learn the lesson that being Batman is bad. That defeats the purpose of going to a Batman film. Alrighty, so that is my review of The Batman. I know. A lot of people really like the movie because, hey, it's Batman. It's hard to dislike Batman. But folks, if you like this video, please like and subscribe and recommend some other movies that are coming up in the near future you'd like.
Yeah, like and subscribe to my movie too. My thing too. Listen, man, Listen, at the end of the day, I liked the movie. I thought that there was some lazy aspects to it. I felt like there was a lot going on. I did feel like the movie dragged a little bit to establish itself, but I think it did a good job establishing itself. I think the ending was solid, but I do think that they had so many very convoluted ideas going on that they had trouble ending it. And so the ending was a little bit bizarre. Again, they established the Riddler as like an incredibly intelligent character that was trying to get rid of the corruption of Gotham City and ultimately try to help people. And then at the end, he kind of just randomly blew up a dam and flooded the city and had a bunch of gunmen kill people. It didn't really make a lot of sense. It hurt the movie for me a little bit because it kind of just it degraded the character of the Riddler that they established. Outside of that, I like the character of the Batman. I think it was different to not have to really focus on his like human aspect of Bruce Wayne. They kind of made him more brooding and emo, which I thought was fine. Again, I was going into their understanding you were going to have an emo fucking Batman, so I was okay with that. But I think Ben, is a nerd. Got him! And that's my takeaway from the movie. I got to take away a piss. I got to take a piss away from my body. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and another special shout out to all my Patreon and Twitch subs. If you'd like to support this channel further than you already have by just watching the video alone, go down to the links below where you can sub on my Patreon, which will allow you to get your name on this beautiful black wall. Or you can go to the Twitch page and you can actually use a free Amazon Prime sub, if you have Amazon Prime, to subscribe. Thank you very much, guys. Take care.